Welcome to our podcast. Today we're going to be focusing on leadership and developing leadership resilience to be more effective as leaders. My name's Lynda Folan, and I'm a doctor of organizational psychology and have a background in helping leaders across the globe to grow and get better at their leadership. I'm going to explore an area of leadership that's really growing in popularity, which is around how do we develop the capability to lead effectively. For years, we've talked about the skills of leadership, the styles of leadership, but unfortunately, what we've forgotten is that unless people have the underlying capability, they're not going to be able to effectively deliver the skills or the styles that are required. In our most recent research in this area, what we found is that if a leader is not developing their underlying capability, they are not going to be able to be effective in the long term. I'd like to kick off chatting about the context of leadership right now. The context of leadership has changed dramatically over the last 5 to 10 years, and particularly escalated over the last 5 years. We've all experienced the dramas of COVID and all the repercussions post-COVID that everyone's dealing with. We all know that the world around us has changed significantly. In that context, the role of leaders has changed significantly. And what we're seeing is some leaders are rising to that challenge and actually delivering great leadership in their organizations. But other leaders are not rising to that challenge and are finding it's hugely difficult to lead in this constantly evolving and changing workplace that we're living in. Our workplaces are no longer static, and hoping that they'll go back to some level of stability is unrealistic. In fact, we're all constantly looking at new ways of doing things. We're running in a world where we have things like resignations going on all the time. We have the Great Resignation. We have all sorts of challenges around our economics, the global issues around financial aspects, and businesses in that context also each individually have their challenges. So if you're sitting in a leadership role right now, you'll be able to tell me the kind of pressures that you're experiencing. All of us are experiencing those similar pressures. They might be slightly different depending on which industry you're in, but in my experience, no one is immune from those pressures. And in that context, our leadership needs to change and evolve. Now, that changing, evolving leadership needs to respond to those demands in the external world, but keep a core and a steadiness around the leadership so that when a leader is responding to that challenging environment, that they still remain stable and well managed inside themselves. And that's where the importance of dispositional attributes has come to the surface when we start to talk about leadership. As I said, for years we've talked about leadership styles, leadership competence and strategies that we should use as leaders, but we've not looked at the internal dispositional attributes as much around what are the dispositional attributes I need to develop as a leader to be effective in this constantly changing world. Now, what we've seen in the last while is that the pressures of the world around us have impacted leaders where they haven't taken care of their dispositional attributes. Now, when we talk about dispositional attributes, that's a techie psychological term that I'd like to just articulate and describe what we mean. We're talking about those internal attributes that are going to help us to externally be able to lead effectively. What we've found in the research is that those internal attributes actually impact our ability to deliver a healthy leadership style. And it's been mapped against one of the strongest and the most prolific leadership models, which is the transformational leadership model. What the transformational leadership model says is that leaders who want to be effective need to actually take cognizance of their people they're leading, lead them effectively as individuals, but also inspire them and engage them in the future of the organization and help them to see the potential of the future. And so when we start to talk about transformational leadership, what our research found was that if you are not taking care of your dispositional attribute, your internal attribute of resilience, you will not be able to be transformational in your leadership. So what do we mean by that? Because we need to make this really practical for leaders who are challenged and finding it challenging in the present context. Well, what we mean is that if you develop resilience, which most of us colloquially understand resilience, if you develop your resilience, you will have the capacity to lead effectively. If you don't, you will undermine your ability to lead. So fundamentally, as a starting point for leadership development, we are now focusing really, really strongly into that resilience space. How do I build my resilience so that I can effectively lead the people around me, inspire them to be everything that they can be, and take them on a journey of success? How do I develop that internal attribute that allows me to lead in that way? Now, for most of us, we've journeyed into leadership by oops, or someone's kind of said to us, oh, hey, why don't you take on a management role? And suddenly we're faced with having to lead a group of people. Not everybody is skilled or capable of leading, unfortunately. And so as a starting point from a leadership perspective, we need to really hone in and develop that internal resilience so that externally we have the capability and we can start to build our leadership style, understand our impact on others. But until we've done the internal work, we're going to find it really difficult to lead externally. Now, the research has been pretty strong and it's coming through faster and faster. There are a lot of researchers in this space starting to do more and more. And we're also seeing the neuroscience behind this aligning with what we're finding in the world of psychology, and in particular in the organizational psychology space. So Dr. Andrew Huberman, who's one of the experts in neuroscience, a lot of his work around the neuroscience in this space corroborates what we know from the work that we've done internally in the psychological space. So there's a lot of corroborating evidence around. There's also lots of researchers doing some great work in this space. Dr. Martin Seligman, one of the key researchers, talks about optimism or how to flourish in the world around us. There are certainly lots of opportunities for us to better understand that dispositional attribute that we need to develop. But I want to hone in on resilience because it is the cornerstone to good leadership. In an organizational setting, we know that if you don't develop your resilience, you are going to seriously battle as a leader. So what do we mean by resilience? Well, for most of us, we think of resilience as the ability to bounce back. That ability to respond to challenges, difficulties, and then bounce back from them. I'm going to suggest to you that actually the definition of resilience, if you look at it across the research, whether that's in social settings or in clinical psychology or in social psychology, the definition of resilience is both the ability to bounce back, but also the ability to maintain health and well-being. So there's two aspects to resilience. That ability to bounce back, deal with challenges, change, transformation in your organization, and then your ability to maintain your health and well-being. So when we talk about resilience, it's not just your ability to bounce back and then you go on holiday and get sick. It is about your ability to maintain the bounce back piece, but also stay healthy and well in yourself. And that requires a discipline and a structure to that discipline and some real understanding of what that discipline needs to entail. So again, the research that we've done looking at the resilience research from across all research around resilience. So we've looked at the research in the clinical field, which was largely dominated by research around young people and the effect of being in homes which had some dysfunctional behavior and how they coped and how resilient they were, to the social psychology of resilience, which looks at how do communities respond resiliently to, let's say, a fire or floods. And so we've looked at all of those areas, plus the research in organizations and the resilience research in organizations. And while that's a newer area of research, it is starting to get faster paced and we're starting to see more coming out. So we've looked at all of that research and defined a model of resilience that is specific to the organizational setting. So while there are models of resilience in a social setting or from a clinical perspective, this is the first fully developed model of resilience in organizations and how people can develop their resilience. So we've housed it in really good foundational research, and we have based it on all the research that's out there around resilience. I will just indicate that in the clinical research and certainly the social research, there is one dimension that we don't talk about in an organizational setting, but does have relevance for our personal resilience, and that is social support. So social support's a really strong area in resilience that comes out as important. So if we have good social support, even if our personal resilience is not where we'd like it to be, our social support network can help us to buoy us up when our resilience isn't quite as strong as we'd like it to be. So when we talk about resilience, resilience in an organizational setting, and particularly with a focus on leaders, if leaders are going to really show that they have resilience, they're going to have to build three key things. And I'll chat about each of those things individually, but let me give you an overview of the model of resilience. So the model of resilience that we developed says that you need to develop, first of all, you need to develop an internal locus of control. And I'll describe what locus of control means, but in simple terms, it means the ability to actually take back ownership of your choices and make a decision to take action, even in a set of circumstances that could be potentially challenging. So that's the first aspect of our resilience that we need to develop. The second aspect that we need to develop is what we've described in this research as self-concept well-being. Now, what we mean by self-concept well-being is two elements. The first one is you need to develop a really clear understanding of yourself. What makes you tick? What's the stuff that gets you excited? What are you passionate about? What makes you engaged in your work and in the work that you're doing? What excites you about leading a team or growing a team? So really understanding your internal or self-concept. The second aspect of self-concept well-being is the ability to develop your emotional intelligence. And I'll talk a bit more about what we mean by emotional intelligence. But in simple terms, it's the ability to really self-reflect and manage our own emotions, and to be aware of other people's emotions and respond healthily to other people's emotions. So self-concept well-being has a double aspect to it. The third aspect that we want to be developing, and is key to our resilience as leaders and within the organizational context, is your constructive thinking. And when we talk about constructive thinking, it is the ability to really understand how dynamic, and we talk about neuroplasticity of the brain, how incredibly pliable the brain is. And really understanding that, and then learning to leverage that. So learning how to actually manage our thinking so that we don't constantly trigger ourselves into negative emotional responses. This is a key aspect of your resilience, and probably the most important from a leadership perspective, because as leaders, if we can't control our thinking and can't control our mental processing, not only are we going to undermine our own resilience, but we're also going to impact our external leadership. So our ability to work with other people. For example, if in my head I'm telling myself that the person I'm dealing with is an idiot, then I'm going to leak that to that person. So my ability to manage my internal processing both supports and enhances my resilience, but it also supports and enhances healthy relationships. So each of the aspects of resilience from a leadership perspective is important in enhancing both my internal resilience, but also my interpersonal leadership. And we talk about intrapersonal leadership, which is my resilience, but our intrapersonal leadership is that ability to be transformational and to make people feel good about doing the job that they're doing for our organizations. Inspire them to be better than they were, grow them to be the best that they can be. If you want to have that kind of impact in your organization, then you really want to develop these three competencies or capabilities. So I said we'd delve into each of them, but just to talk a little bit about the technical aspects of the research and the findings from the research, what we found is that constructive thinking has the highest correlation with resilience. So it has a slightly higher impact. And what we also found is that it also has a very strong correlation with your leadership. So when other people measure your leadership, it has a really strong correlation with your constructive thinking. So if you've got good constructive thinking, people will measure you as a better leader. So really important to acknowledge that constructive thinking is the strongest indicator of your internal resilience, but it also has a huge impact on your leadership, your ability to lead externally. So that's a bit of the technical aspect, and to be clear, the technical aspects of the research are housed both in my doctoral thesis, as well as we've put a fair chunk of that into my book, which covers all of the information that I'm going to talk about today. So I'm not going to go into any more technical detail because I don't think that's helpful. We're trying to understand how I can be a better leader, and so I want to focus in on that. Now, not only have we done the research around this, but we've also been developing leaders for a long time in this space and helping them to be better leaders. And I was with a group just the last 3 days, and I always feel great satisfaction when I can see those light bulb moments where people actually transform their thinking around their leadership. And I know that they will take that back and do their leadership differently. I hear lots of stories from leaders who we've worked with over the years who have said, oh my gosh, that just transformed my leadership. But not just their leadership. If you focus on your resilience, what you get is an incredible outcome in your personal life as well. So when we start to talk about leadership, leadership is just as much around how do you lead at home as it is around how do you lead at work. And for most of us, we want to be as effective a leader at home as we are at work. And so this has a double whammy effect in that if you grow your resilience, you'll be more effective in dealing with those challenges at home as much as you will be in leading your people. But let's focus on the organizational aspect. So I said there are 3 key aspects to your resilience that you want to develop. Let's kick off with the first one. So the first one is our ability to really learn how to stay internally locused. Now, to describe that, I'm going to talk about the 2 different aspects of locus of control, and really clearly articulate for you what they are. So the research on locus of control is pretty extensive. It's been researched for about 100 years, 80 to 100 years in psychology. So it's a highly researched area. Lots of researchers looking at what locus of control is. Now, what locus of control is talking about is that some people end up in what we call externally locused position. An externally locused person really doesn't believe that they have control over things. So they start to feel like they are a victim of their circumstances. It's either, someone else's fault, or it's the organization's fault, or how terrible is it that our organization's under so much pressure externally. And they externalize their locus, and they really do think that success is more related to luck and not to their own actions. So you can imagine that someone who's externally locused, when they are under pressure, as we know most people are in the workplace today, they're going to become almost incapacitated, and their resilience is going to drop dramatically. So we do know that if we want people to be resilient and capable of coping, they have to learn how to be, as we describe it, externally locused. So they have to develop that external locus of control, which is the ability to believe that if I do something, it's going to make a difference. Now, if someone's internally locused, if someone's internally locused, they have the ability to actually understand that if they take action, it's going to make a difference. So they're no longer caught up in the victim mentality, and they're comfortable actually going, oh, if I take action, this is going to make a difference. So our internally locused people actually take back responsibility for taking action, and they will do things, even in the most tough situations, they will take action to try and shift things. Now, if you think about that from a leadership perspective, that's fundamental in a leadership role. If you are sitting externally locused in a leadership role and going, oh, woe is me, I can't do anything, you are going to get really, really slammed, and you're going to really battle to lead. The minute we can step onto that internally locused space and really start to go, what's the action I can take? Yes, the circumstances might not be great, but what's the action I can take to actually get better at what I do? I'm then going to take action, and sometimes it won't work, sometimes it will work, but I'm actually going to understand that taking action makes a difference. And so when we talk about resilience allows the leader, in this aspect of resilience, allows the leader to take action even in the most challenging of circumstances. Now, most of the things that people get really over-egged about in an organization are actually quite small and minor. I'm often saying to people, oh, don't worry about that. That's not important. That's kind of a first world issue. Those first world issues, if we've got good resilience and we are internally locused, we're way less likely to get triggered into a reaction to that. So it is really important when we start to talk about leadership and our ability to lead that we have this internal locus of control. Now, what we do know is that most of us do become externally locust sometimes, yeah? We all get a bit, oh, woe is me, it's horrible and I don't like this. But as leaders, our job is to constantly reevaluate and shift ourselves to that internally locust space. If we don't, and we become caught up in that rhetoric, oh, it's so hard, it's our shareholders, it's our bosses, it's the external environment, or it's interest rates, or it's whatever, those external factors, or we're heading into recession, it's just bad around here, whatever those external factors, if we focus on those, we're going to reduce our resilience. If we can come inside and go, okay, the circumstances are not great, but what action can I take and how am I going to lead in this space? That's when we get the better, stronger leadership and people are able to lead effectively. So we're constantly, I would say, we're constantly making a decision. Am I going to be internally locust or externally locust? Our job as leaders, I believe, is to stay internally locust. And if we see our people going down the route of being externally locust, because that happens, then we want to draw them with us and bring them back to that internally locust. Unfortunately, though, if I'm not internally locust, I can't lead my team effectively because they're just going to say, oh, boss, you're not leading the way. Because people look to our actions, not to what we say. So it's really important that you lead the way in this as a leader and keep yourself internally locust, believing that what you do makes a difference. Even if sometimes it isn't successful, it's going, okay, that wasn't successful. So what next can I do? And what action am I going to take? So super important for us to actually understand that responsibility. I often say to leaders, leadership is not a position on an organizational chart. It is a choice, and the choice is ours as to how we want to lead. If we want to lead effectively, we have to make that choice to be internally locust. And there's lots of strategies around what we can do to be internally locust. But I guess the key starting point is to make the decision and to make the choice to actually understand that we are responsible for choosing to be internally or externally locust. Now, I do also understand that sometimes we get externally locust unconsciously. Maybe something's happened repeatedly and we just, oh, it's just so bad around here. I do understand that. We're not naive enough to believe that we can be constantly internally locust. But the minute you hear yourself going down that route of that, oh, woe is us, you want to be able to pull yourself back from it. I would say that one of the best strategies for maintaining that internal locus is to have good people around you who will challenge you when you start to get into that victim mode. Who will say to you, oh, hey, Lynda, you've got a bit negative in that. Why don't you come out and just be a bit more positive? Let's look for the positives. So having someone in your orbit who actually helps to pull you out. So when we talk about leadership is totally a choice. Don't underestimate that it is a big choice. And while you will get the most incredible value from being a leader, you will also be pressurized. So when we talk about that internal versus external locus, understand that you are going to be put under pressure as a leader, but the choice that we need to make is to stay internally locused. And the strategies that we can use around this are incredibly powerful. So I would suggest, as I've already said, that you have someone in your orbit who's good at calling you when you've become a bit of a victim, or you're whining and moaning about the same thing repeatedly. And also to have good mentors. Now, I would say that one of the single most important things in my career has been having great mentors around me over the time of my career. I tend to have more than one mentor at any one time, only because I think different people give you a different perspective. That mentorship is an opportunity for me to go and download with the person and just talk about what is it that's getting me internally or externally locused, whichever side of of it that I'm sitting, and particularly when I'm getting wound up by something. So I would use my mentors when I'm finding myself getting churned up about something, or when I'm just not as focused as I'd like to be. So mentoring is a great strategy to use. Often young leaders ask me, well, how do I find a mentor? My view is that mentors are out there for you. You've just got to go and ask someone. I've never had a mentor say no to me, but it is around you making that choice. Some organizations do provide mentoring, and that mentoring is available in a professional setting for some organizations. But for me, that's not been the case. I've just gone out and found my mentors. So anything I've wanted to develop or grow or really challenge myself in, I've gone and found mentors that can help me with that. And they are people for whom for me, they provide wisdom for me in a way that I don't get necessarily in the work that I do. So I also, as a psychologist, I am required to have professional supervision. But for me, that's different. That's around my practice. My mentors are more around growing me as a person and helping me to be the best I can be. And as a leader, I believe that's really important. Really important as leaders. Your learning journey starts from when you become a leader, and it never stops. I often tell teams and people that my son, when he was younger and I was doing my doctorate, and he said to me, his question to me was, "Mom, aren't you a bit old to be studying?" And I went, absolutely not. As a leader, I need to be constantly growing and developing my skills. No, I don't need to be studying all the time, but I need to be growing my skills. So I do a lot of work around my own self and developing what's my internal leadership, what's my external impact. So that need to grow as a leader is hugely important. And when we talk about leadership, understand that it is really important that we are growing and developing. And that internal versus external locus of control is an area that most of us need to grow in. We do spend, in society, we spend a lot of time on that externally locused. I do think social media has made that worse. Unfortunately, there's some fantastic aspects to social media. The fact that we can get information out through things like podcasts, fantastic. But there's also some downsides to that, is we have become a society of being very reactionary. And that leads us to that externally locused position. What we want to do is actually learn how to go, that's the stimulus I'm experiencing, but I'm still going to choose my response. I'm not going to react to it. I'm going to choose my response. And it's in the simple little things. You know, when you get that email from someone that you read as quite aggressive and you want to respond straight away. It's about actually stopping, not responding, putting it in draft if you have written an email, and thinking about it overnight and then coming back to it and responding more healthily. So it's in the little stuff as well as the big stuff. You know, when something goes wrong at work, what are you going to do? Are you going to react to that? Or are you going to take your time to think through what the better reaction is and be internally locused and choose those reactions rather than just be very reactionary in that external place? As I say, society and a lot of our social media is pushing us to be reactionary. And we really need, as leaders, to learn how to be really strong and controlled about how we respond to the world around us. So that's the first aspect of your resilience. Let's talk about the second aspect of your resilience. So the second aspect of your resilience is your self-concept well-being. When we talk about self-concept well-being is the ability to really understand you. Now, I know I'm at a little bit of an advantage as a psychologist because we do a lot of that self-reflection. It's just part of what we do in developing our skills as psychologists. But I do think we, as leaders, I don't care what team you're leading, what organization you're leading, what industry you're leading in, you need to do that personal self-reflection to understand you first and foremost. Because once you understand you, then you can actually lead effectively. Until you understand you, you're going to be pressurized by things that are not natural. And when we talk about leadership, in today's world, we're looking for leaders who can be authentic, who can be themselves, but also have a healthy impact on people around them. We're not looking for those fake leaders who, present one thing and deliver something else. We're looking for authenticity. We're looking for people to actually lead from their heart, not from their heads. And we want people to authentically care about the teams they lead, the organizations that they lead. So first and foremost, we've got to know who we are. If you're a technical expert and you really don't like people, as I sometimes hear from people, if you're a technical expert and you don't like people, then leadership's going to be tough. Unless you make some choices that you're really passionate about leading people, that's going to be a really hard choice. You're going to have to work really hard at learning how to have good empathy. The minute we step into a leadership role, our job is about leadership. It's not about the technical aspects. Yes, we need to help our people deliver the technical aspects, but our job is about leading them and getting the most out of them. And the more senior you get in an organization, the more important it is to understand that your leadership is about how you engage and inspire people, how you draw your stakeholders on the journey with you, how you bring your teams on the journey with you, not about whether the technical aspects are correct. Yes, your team will deliver the technical aspects, but if you don't look after your teams and your organization and your organization's culture, you're not going to effectively deliver in this constantly challenging and volatile world that we're living in. So when we talk about self-concept well-being, that first aspect is hugely important. Now, some of the strategies here are around just making opportunities for yourself to do any form of personality diagnostic, 360 diagnostic. And a 360 diagnostic is just getting feedback from other people around your leadership. Getting that feedback is helping you to develop an understanding of you. What do you look like in terms of your impact? Personality diagnostics helped you to understand some of your internal processing. And also to do that reflective piece around, what are my values? What's important to me in life? Is it important to me to climb the ladder? Or is it important for me to do a really great job of where I am and then be offered the opportunity? What's it that drives me? What is it that's my internal drive? Is it about passion for my industry, or is it about passion for my leadership? So understanding all of those and doing the thinking around that is hugely important. And unfortunately, you've got to make time for that. I was lucky enough in the earlier part of my corporate career, when I was with the Hard Rock Cafe, I was lucky enough to go to Utah and study with Stephen Covey, who's one of the gurus of personal effectiveness and I would say resilience. And Stephen talks very strongly around getting clear around what your mission in life is. And I can't suggest more strongly that his book is amazing in terms of guiding you in thinking about what do you want out of life? What does life look like for you in the broader sense rather than just work? Once you understand that, then your leadership journey is part of that. And so when things go wrong at work, you're not destabilized because you've got this stable underlying strength that you bring to your leadership. And it allows you to be more authentic, to be who you are in a leadership role, and yet still deliver great leadership. So hugely important, and again, there are a lot of strategies out there, but really the fundamental piece is you've got to do the self-reflection around who are you and what do you want out of your life, and then start to put in place the strategies that allow you to do what you want to do. So I personally have a huge passion around travel, and so part of my life journey has been to make plenty of opportunities to travel. And I've lived on four different continents in 5 different countries, and I've traveled to over 108 countries. So for me, that's part of my personal passion, and my leadership journey has also collaborated with that passion. And so a lot of my leadership roles have required travel and have allowed me to travel to different places. But I've also challenged myself in terms of moving country, because every time I move country, I have to do another qualification for that country or update my qualification. So it has put some pressure on me as a leader to develop for the context that I'm in. But that understanding of me has allowed me to develop and grow my leadership career in alignment with my personal passion in life. So, and also the work I do, I'm hugely passionate about helping people to be the best they can be. And I know that that's my passion in life. So being able to do that in a work setting is an incredible opportunity. And that's what helps to keep me balanced in my focus on leadership. So we need to do that work. The second aspect of self-concept well-being is your ability to develop good emotional intelligence. Now, the research around emotional intelligence has been around for a while. And I often hear people sprouting out, quotes on emotional intelligence. But actually, emotional intelligence is a hugely practical skill. And you learn it by actually working with yourself and with other people, getting feedback, developing your skills, and then growing your capacity to deal with emotions. The days of saying, leave your emotions at the door and come into work are gone. And they're gone forever, unfortunately. You cannot ask your people to come into work and not bring that emotionality with them. That's unfortunately not a reality. And we're seeing increased rates of mental health issues in the workplace. So most of you who are sitting in leadership roles will have someone with mental health issues in your team, or you'll be dealing with people who are having challenges at work that are causing them personal pressure. So it's a reality that we really need to develop better skills in emotional intelligence. Yes, your smarts or your IQ or your intelligence is one aspect, but your emotional intelligence is the aspect that develops your resilience and develops your capacity to lead effectively in that interpersonal space. So when we talk about leadership, leadership is the ability to actually understand emotions, understand my own emotions first, then understand other people's emotions, and effectively work with emotions to get results in an organization. So the outcome is good relationships and good organizational outcomes, but we need to develop this skill. So what is emotional intelligence? Well, emotional intelligence, if you look at Martin Seligman's work, if you look at Daniel Goleman's work, and any of the writers in this space who talk about emotional intelligence, really has it's probably got 5 key aspects. The first aspect is I've got to get self-aware about my own emotions. So I've got to get cued into my triggers, my emotional reactions. So why am I having that emotional reaction? The second thing that we need to develop in emotional intelligence is the understanding that I need to manage effectively my emotions. So I need to be able to manage my emotionality, manage my emotions effectively to be situationally acceptable, and actually develop the capacity to release those emotions at the right time as well. So when we're talking about managing emotions, we're not talking about suppressing emotions. We're talking about the ability to manage them effectively. So I might be going into a meeting and I suddenly have an emotional reaction because of something that's happened. In that meeting, I need to constantly put that aside and actually be present in that meeting. However, afterwards, I need to go and deal with that emotion and go, why did I react to that set of circumstances? What was my reaction telling me about me? And so we want to be able to manage that emotional reaction and deal with it effectively. So it's both aspects. And when we talk about personality, it's really important that emotional intelligence helps us to manage our personalities more effectively. Not change your personality, but manage the impact of your personality. So for example, if I know that I'm an extrovert, but I've got a team who are introverts who like to actually have quiet time to get on with their work, then as an extrovert, I need to manage that impact I have on them and not go around pestering them all the time. Vice versa, if I'm an introvert and I'm leading a team, I know if I'm an introvert that I would like to stay in my cave and, go into my office and withdraw and have plenty of thinking time. But as a leader, I know that I need to be out there chatting to my people, seeing how they are, checking on their well-being. So I make a choice to go out and check on my people. So when we talk about the self-management aspect, it actually starts with the self-awareness, then drips into okay, now I need to manage my impact. So that's the first starting point of emotional intelligence. That's self-awareness and self-management. The other aspect of emotional intelligence is actually really starting to become aware of other people's emotionality and their emotional reactions. So if you walk into a room, say something, and it lands badly, being able to pick up, oh, wow, that's landed badly. What's happened there? Why has that happened like that? And being able to reflect on that and then change my behavior to get back on track. So going, oh, I noticed that reactions happened. Can I just say that wasn't my intention? So being able to actually have the social skills to leverage, to fix things when maybe I've stepped in and I shouldn't have. Or when we've sent an email that hasn't hit well, being able to go to that person and say, Really sorry that had that impact. That really wasn't my intention. This was my intention. Can we talk about it? So that ability to actually notice other people's emotional reactions and actually healthily respond to those and develop the social skills. If you want to be an effective leader, you have to develop social skills. And it doesn't matter who you are personality-wise, you need to be able to have those social skills to work effectively with people. It's no longer okay for leaders to hide away in their office or just to negatively impact people without consciousness. We do know that in today's world, there's a lot more claims of bullying or harassment. So we need to be really clued in to our impact on others as leaders. If we're not clued into that impact, we can have an unconscious impact that's not healthy. So that's where that emotional intelligence helps us to have our antenna out and see when we're having a negative impact on others and then manage that effectively. I'm not saying any of us get it right all of the time. We definitely don't. But can we then go back and deal with that? Go back and talk to the person or talk to the team that we've had an impact on. As leaders, I believe we're constantly doing that. So that social awareness or that ability to pick up other people's emotions and then those social skills, that ability to work effectively with other people is huge. Now, as leaders, as I said, sometimes we've oopsed into leadership roles and we're not aware of our impact because that's not something we've had to be aware of before. So if you've come from a technical role and been promoted into a leadership role, you might not have had to have thought about your impact. So when we talk about leadership, that choice is around learning really quickly how to lead and how to impact healthily on others. And really important that we develop those skills. So when we talk about leadership, leadership is a requirement that we develop those emotional intelligence skills and are able to actually build our ability to deal with the quirks of human nature. And I always say that as a leader, your biggest challenge is not knowing the technical aspects of your job, but it's your ability to actually work effectively with people. We used to call emotional intelligence the soft skills. I don't believe they're the soft skills. I think they're the hardest skills. And I don't think we've ever fully learned them. I think we're constantly learning our emotional intelligence. Now, some strategies around emotional intelligence. I think one of the biggest things is put yourself in situations that you know you're not comfortable with and learn how to become comfortable. Don't take the easy option. Challenge yourself. If you've never done presentations, go do a presentation. Get some feedback, find out what you did well, and then do it better next time. If you're not good at team meetings, lead a team meeting, get someone to give you some feedback and learn from that and develop your skills. So emotional intelligence is about working with people, learning how to ebb and flow emotions and how to manage energy in a room and how to manage the emotional positivity in a room. So go and get those skills. There's lots of strategies, but the main one is push yourself out of your comfort zone, do things that you're not comfortable with, and then learn from those. Feedback and self-reflection are key in the space of emotional intelligence. Reflecting on what you do well, reflecting on what you don't do so well. 360s again are incredible opportunity here and can help you to really grow your skills. So again, there's lots of other strategies that we talk about in my book, but those are some strategies that can help you initially. And I want to roll on to talking about the last and the most important aspect of your resilience, your constructive thinking. Now, constructive thinking and neuroplasticity and all the research around rewiring your brain is relatively new. So it's only really started to bubble up in the last 10 to 15 years, but it is starting to come fast and furiously. And what we know now about the brain and how it works is hugely important in helping us to understand how we can get more constructive in our thinking. Now, the researchers tell us that we have 60 to 200 thoughts per minute. So we have a lot of thinking going on in our heads. We describe it in the world of psychology as self-talk, that internal chatter that's just constantly running, for some of us more so than others. But if you want to really develop your resilience and be a better leader, you need to start to manage your thinking and build your capacity to manage your thinking. And start to actually reframe your thinking when it gets negative. So, you know, when you hop in the car in the morning and you hit the first lot of traffic, or, you know, you're trying to get to work on time and you can feel that you're not going to get there. When that negative, destructive thinking starts to run, be able to reframe that and change that to, hey, it's a good day, the weather's nice, I'm going to have a great day at work, and really reframe that thinking into more positive. That's what we're talking about. Being able to actually realign your thinking to more positive, healthy thinking. When you get into work and there's a million challenges that you've got to deal with, instead of going down the road of, oh, it's so bad, I don't want to do this, actually reframing your thinking and going, yay, I've got lots of challenges today. How am I going to handle those? That ability to shift your thinking is fundamental to your resilience and fundamental to your leadership. If you are thinking destructive thoughts, then you are going to undermine your resilience and undermine your leadership. One of the areas that we're seeing this bubbling out at the moment is in that unconscious bias space. Now, leaders who've been leading for a long time have often got their own internal unconscious bias. Well, all of us have unconscious bias, let's face it. Yeah, we all have some level of unconscious bias. But what we're seeing in the workplace is that you can no longer hold on to that unconscious bias. It's just not a possibility in leadership anymore. And we do need to develop that capacity to manage our unconscious bias. The only way we're going to do that is to learn how to reframe our thinking and to get rid of that negativity in our thinking. And that goes in all areas of unconscious bias, whether it's, discriminatory thinking about people who are from a different race or a different gender or a different background or a different personality. Doesn't matter where that bias comes from. We need to shift that in our own internal processing. Our ability as leaders to manage our thinking and actually enhance our thinking and be more constructive is hugely important. Now, it's really useful to understand the way we process things in our brain. So we take everything into our brains via our senses. They come in via our senses. We filter those through us. So in your cerebral cortex is all about you. So your personality, your values, who you are, how you were brought up. And so when stuff comes in, you are filtering through you. Now, you don't choose an emotional reaction until you've first filtered your experience through you. So your understanding of what you experienced is already filtered by you. So if you can filter it healthily, you're going to trigger an emotional response in your amygdala that's going to be more healthy. If you filter it through you in a negative way, then it's going to trigger a negative emotional reaction. So when we start to talk about our ability to be constructive in our thinking, we need to learn how to filter things healthily rather than unhealthily. Now, again, unfortunately, society has told us to a certain extent that we need to filter things negatively. And actually, there's some new research that tells us that actually we retain negative thoughts way longer than we retain positive thoughts. In fact, 4 times longer. So we need to actually rewire our brains to start to get them to think more positively. Now, there's a lot of stuff in your external world and my external world that tells us we should think negatively. You only have to go and look at the news. The news is dominantly around what's not working or what's horrible in the world around us and all of those sorts of things. But in reality, if we're going to get better at leading and we're going to get better at our resilience, we need to reframe that. And in our brains, realign our brains to constructive thinking. And there's a lot of research out there in this space now, so I do encourage you to explore it. But some of the key strategies that we're seeing in this space that are super helpful in building your constructive thinking and developing your capacity to think more positively. The first one that I have to mention is some sort of meditative practice. Now, be really careful to think about meditation just as a sat down version. It could be that you do yoga or Tai Chi. So the martial arts, a lot of the martial arts have a meditative element to them. So you need to find the process that works best for you. But meditation, so the neuroscientist Andrew Huberman and people like that are saying that this is key to managing your mental processing. We've known it for a long time in psychology that it's a really healthy, robust way of keeping control of your mind, and it helps you to develop mental control. So some sort of meditative process. The other key strategy, and this comes up again and again in research, is some sort of, I want to call it journaling, but however you want to describe it, dumping of those negative thoughts. So journaling is used a lot. Stephen Covey talks about journaling. So do a lot of the neuroscience researchers. But it's a hugely powerful strategy for getting rid of that negative thinking. So those are 2 really powerful strategies. Again, there's a lot of other strategies in my book that will help you to develop a greater level of constructive thinking. But I am conscious that we've talked quite a lot, and I am going to wrap up our time there and just encourage you to continue as a leader. If you want to be really effective as a leader, you need to develop your ability to be resilient. Today's world's not going to get any easier, and your leadership journey is not going to get any easier as you journey along the leadership route, but it is going to get easier if you can build your resilience. If your resilience is high, you'll find it so much easier to lead effectively and be that leader that you want to be. Inspire other people to be the best that they can be and actually lead from an authentic place and deliver great leadership to the people that you lead and the organizations that you lead. So thank you for your time, and thank you for listening to us on this podcast.